Hi, welcome back to New Horizons in Chinese Philosophy. This is Lecture 12. In this lecture, we will continue to discuss Xunzi. We will focus on his metaphysical views on the human and cosmic. The first question, the human and cosmic. In last lecture, we talked about Xunzi's social and political ideas. We find that there is little reference to heaven. This is consistent with the Confucian view that the shaping of the human order is a human enterprise. But we need to know that the Li, which play a crucial role in human culture, are in fact linked to the patterns which govern the cosmic order. The relationship between culture and nature seems to be complicated in Xunzi. The incalculable, limitless desires derive from heaven or nature. They lead to all the anarchy and disorders of human society. The spontaneous natural tendencies causes all the misfortunes of humans. In sharp contrast to Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi, it is in the specifically human aspect of man that Xunzi seeks man's salvation. Man's deliberating, calculating, planning, goal-directed mind is his glory as man. This is his ability to make and fashion. Xunzi's conception of heaven seems profoundly Taoist. He totally accepts Zhuangzi's distinction between that which heaven does and that which man does. However, he inverts Zhuangzi's values. Heaven is not providential. It does not concern itself with the fate of human individuals or collectivities. Quote, heaven is invariable in its actions. It is not present for Yao and absent for Jie. End quote. Quote again. It does not put an end to winter because man hates the cold. The earth does not put an end to the vastness of its dimensions because man hates long distances, and the noble man does not suspend his action because small men are in an uproar. End quote. So, heaven pursues its spontaneous course without regard for man. Xunzi's view of heaven is also directed against the correlative cosmology. Heaven does not resonate with and react to human affairs. It does not reveal man's fortunes through the configurations of human physiognomy. Xunzi embraces a sort of scientific humanism. Heaven has no concern for man, but man, by closely and consciously studying the regularities of heaven or nature, can take full advantage of them for his own conscious purposes. If men make proper provisions for meeting all the known vicissitudes of nature, then they will be performing their proper functions as men. The vicissitudes of nature include floods, droughts, calamities of all sorts, and even unaccountable prodigies. Quote, heaven has its seasons. The earth has its resources. Man has his power to order things, and it is thus that he participates in the activities of heaven and the earth. to abandon that by which he participates, and to desire to possess that within which he participates, is to lead to utter confusion. End quote. It is Zhuangzi who wishes to possess that within which he participates. Xunzi aspires only to know heaven in itself and to be one with heaven. Xunzi emphasizes the concrete observation of nature as it presents itself to us in ordinary experience. Having observed the patterns and regularities of heaven and earth, one immediately applies this empirical knowledge to one's practical needs. As Xunzi says with regard to the movement of heavenly bodies, the cycle of the 4 seasons, the transformations of yin and yang, and the 10,000 things in general, quote, one does not see their causes, but one sees their outcomes. This is what we mean when we call it numinous or mysterious. Everyone knows about their coming into being, but no one knows their formless origins. That is why we call it heaven. The sage does not seek to know heaven. End quote. For man's purposes, it is not necessary to linger on the hidden springs of things. We know that all things spring from the unknowable Tao. There is no need to look for a more real reality behind our directly experienced reality. We already know the basic observable, predictable patterns. These can be relied on to serve human purposes. Although Xunzi agrees with Laozi and Zhuangzi that the processes and entities of nature and their repetitive patterns emerge out of the mysterious womb of the formless, he does not accept their mystical fixation on heaven or the formless Tao as an end in itself. Laozi and Zhuangzi praise heaven and meditate on it. They contemplate the mysteries of the 4 seasons in ecstatic sense. They desire to be at one with that from which things arise, rather than deal with things when they are actualized. Their views dwell on the mystical as an end in itself and ignores the practical. While Xunzi may be grouped with the Daoists in his view of heaven, his defined affirmation of man's active consciousness and his profound faith in the power of human conscious activity places him on this issue on the side of the Moists. Moist logicians tend to defend the capacity of human language to constitute the true nature of the world. They emphasize our ordinary commonsensical experience. Like Moists, Xunzi objects to the efforts of Hui Shi, Zhuangzi, and Gongcun Longzi to undermine our faith in ordinary experience. Both the Moists and Xunzi are confident in their faith in the language we use to refer to the world of nature, but they are aware that the language of human and social affairs can become highly confused and problematic. This is also something Confucius recognized. They are all convinced that a truly correct language is a product of conscious human activity. This language is to provide a clear and unambiguous picture of both the natural and human world. Xunzi believes that such a language has already been created by both the people and sage kings of old. But the Mohists are convinced that such a language is yet to be fully fashioned. Xunzi treats language as a conscious human creation. This leads him to adopt the view that there is no inherent relation between the sounds of words and their meanings. The names of the 10,000 things arose out of meanings attached by the ancients over the course of time to various sounds by a process of conventional agreement. The names of categories of institutions, ranks, laws, and li are formed out of the process through which the sage kings assign all the categories of experience to the proper classes, categories, and relations. As it goes, they conventionally assign certain meanings to certain sounds. Quote, a name has no inherent appropriateness. One names by establishing a convention. Once the convention is fixed, the usage becomes established, and we call it appropriate, unquote. Xunzi also believes that the sage kings not only associated names with the objects of our common experience, but also devise all the categories and classes. This allowed them to assign words to their proper levels of reference. When it is appropriate to refer to the features that all 10,000 things shared in common, they use the highly abstract common name, thing, to refer to the highly abstract property of being a determinate something as such. So, the word thing is a common name. When one wishes to differentiate animals and birds from things in general, one uses the term birds and beasts as classes. This is a way of differentiating properties from the point of view of things in general. It is also a way to referring to the common properties of birds and beasts, for example, the fact that they are living. The establishment of a clear and unambiguous language had been primarily the work of the sage kings. Xunzi's work provides the authentic interpretation of that language. The Mohists and logicians make him aware of logical categories. Xunzi does not only believe that the sages had clearly established the fundamental logical categories and classes. He also believes that they had solved the problem of applying those categories and classes to reality. What the sages had bequeathed was a complete map of social reality. The Mohist logicians also strive to establish a complete, coherent, normative language. But their work seems to be an ongoing project. They are interested in finding particular causes for separate realities. They applied their interest to the investigations in the area of natural science. Xunzi does not follow the Mohists in their concern with optics, mechanics, or other natural sciences. Xunzi does not engage in argument with Mohists about the logical fallacies or with Hui Shi and Gongsun Longzi regarding the sophists. He simply indicates how their propositions diverge from the true picture of reality provided by the sage king. In dealing with the Moist proposition that, quote, to kill a robber is not to kill a man, unquote, he does not enter into the involved argument behind this proposition. The involved argument goes like this. The Moists maintain that one is to love all men universally. If one is to love all men universally, one should not kill robbers, since robbers are men. The Moists argue that while robbers are men, the particular differential properties which make them robbers are such that one must base one's action on this differential property of being robbers rather than on the common property of their humanity, if the interests of mankind in general are to be served. One must kill them precisely because they are robbers, not because they are men. To Xunzi, this seems to be a case of, quote, using terms to confuse terms, unquote. Everyone knows that a robber is a man. No one doubts that to kill a robber is to kill a man. No matter how the argument goes, a robber is no other than man. This is a basic Confucian assumption. Xunzi's attitude toward logic is that the sages in their cogitations had not only developed whatever logic was required for their needs, but had already embedded the logic in a language. This is a language that provides a complete and comprehensive map of reality. However, this language does not seem to be adequate in dealing with the relation between heaven and man. How is it that the function of heaven can be differentiated from the functions of man? As we have seen in Xunzi, heaven is immanent in the human organism in the form of the human recalcitrant nature. In Speaking the Mind, Xunzi calls it the heavenly ruler. This shows that, in some sense, heaven is immanent in the mind itself. However, mind is usually understood to be the organ of deliberate consciousness and presumably the center of that which differentiates man from heaven. Here's a subtle and difficult analysis of the relation of heaven to the human mind. What the sage ultimately attains through his powers of reason is a comprehensive, impartial view of reality. He understands that the human deliberative consciousness is a frail possession. It can be easily drowned in passion. It can also easily become obsessed with some lopsided aspect of reality. This would becloud the grasp of the whole. Quote, the sage knows that the great calamity in the mind's pursuit of true method is that the mind will become beclouded and obstructed, unquote. How does the sage maintain a transcendent overview? How does man truly know the way? The answer is, quote, through emptiness, unity, and quietude. The mind has never ceased to accumulate, and yet it has what it is called emptiness. It has never ceased to have different thoughts, and yet it is pervaded with what is called unity. It has never ceased to be in motion, and yet it has what is called quietude, end quote. All of those Taoist attributes somehow manifest themselves at the very heart of the sage's conscious life. The sage plunges actively into the world of reflecting, reasoning, intending, and planning. He does not simply see the whole picture in a flash through his synoptic intuition. However, he manages to establish and maintain contact with the inner nature of the Tao. In fact, the mind of the sage embodies the Tao. Xunzi describes a state of enlightenment in which, quote, among the 10,000 things, there is no form which one does not see. Sitting in one's room, one sees the four C's. Located in the present, one sees all eternity, end quote. Such a state of enlightenment is arrived at only after supreme intellectual effort. It seems that emptiness, unity, and quietude are a necessary precondition of a truly objective grasp of reality. There seems to be a dimension of mind of the sage which carries him far beyond his rational intelligence. This is a level of the mind of sages, which assimilates the human to the heavenly. By doing so, it gives a transcendental dimension to the human intelligence itself. In the mind of sage-like man, the abyss between man and heaven is somehow bridged. This is, of course, a truly Taoist dimension of Xunzi. However, Xunzi remains to be a confusion. To Xunzi, the sages and the noblemen do not escape the need for intellectual and moral effort, and the need for accumulating new knowledge. Confucius had already had a kind of intuition of the unity which lies behind all learning. Xunzi's emptiness, unity, and quietude are to make sure that the knowledge already acquired does not harm the knowledge yet to be received, because one's mind is unblocked and unbeclouded. He can fit all new knowledge into his comprehensive perspective. As a matter of fact, Xunzi is himself able to incorporate insights drawn from legalism, monism, and all sorts of perspectives into his Confucian framework. Nevertheless, Xunzi's sages and noblemen still have links to the frailties of their unruly, creaturely nature. The mind is called the heavenly ruler, and in its relations to the passions and sensual lusts of its own body, it must assume the role of an active earthly ruler. It issues commands which the body must obey. The human who achieves a state of emptiness, unity, and quietude will achieve a complete victory over his own infirmities. So, we see that heaven is present not only in the recalcitrant forces of human nature, but also in the human mind itself. This is the very instrument of salvation. The objective order of society embodied in Li and law is also on some level embedded in the order of heaven. In fashioning the human order, the sages do not freely invent, but actually make manifest a universal pattern that is somehow already in the ultimate nature of things. In spite of all this, the human being is still an ill-adjusted organism. Heaven is present in the individual's human recalcitrant nature. It is immanent in the human mind. It is also immanent in the pattern of the normative order actualized by the sage. The area of non-immanence is the area where all these categories interact. Within this area, the conscious mind, particularly the conscious mind of sages and noblemen, must undertake their enormous efforts to win control over themselves and over the human environment. Through their minds, they can draw on the power of the emptiness, unity, and the quietude of the Tao. Unlike Confucius and Mencius, Xunzi's noblemen do not rely so much on the mysterious and utterly inscrutable ways of heaven in history. Quote, are order and disorder due to heaven? End quote. The answer is that, quote, the calculations of the positions of stars, moon, and planet are the same for the virtuous Emperor Yu and the villainous King Jie. Yu responded to them by creating order. Jie responded to them by creating disorder. End quote. The nobleman must be active in doing everything possible to advance the cause of order. Like the most worthy man, he cannot hold back from giving advice to anyone. He must be informed of current affairs and more flexible than the purist Mencius in the advice he gives as a statesman. Where a situation is unfavorable to kingly government, he can try to persuade the ruler that the way he can achieve some progress in his narrow pursuit of wealth and power is by establishing an honest hegemonic government. If he is not employed by the ruler, he can find solace in the Taoist dimension of clear enlightenment. This he can find in the inner depths of his own heavenly mind.